The subcommittee will now come to order. Today we welcome Administrator Michael Huerta from the Federal Aviation Administration to discuss the fiscal year 2017 budget request. Administrator Huerta, we appreciate your flexibility today and your willingness to be here. We originally had you scheduled as part of a panel with the Federal Railroad Administration, but we had a last-minute schedule change, and now we can dedicate this hearing again to the FAA. I know you're really happy about the fact that we're only going to be focusing on you today. We will try, members, we will try to schedule the FRA for a later date. And again, Administrator Huerta, this is your fifth appearance before this committee. We thank you for your distinguished record of service, and we always look forward to your testimony, as we do today. FAA is requesting $15.9 billion in new budgetary resources for fiscal year 2017, a reduction of $381 million below last year's level. Excuse me. This reduction, however, is mostly due to a request to reduce the airport grant program by $450 million, along with an increase to passenger fees. Now, I don't have to tell you all, this is already this type of proposal has been proposed and rejected a number of different times. Putting aside this, frankly, what is an artificial cut, we see an increase in the operations account of $85 million, a cut to facilities and equipment of $17 million, and a $1.5 million increase to the research budget. We are looking forward to working with you to ensure that the FAA's resources are put to work for the benefit of the flying public, obviously while being good stewards of the taxpayer money. And I don't have to tell you that we face some challenges, whether it's advancing NextGen, ensuring the right staffing levels to our air traffic control facilities, and integrating the UAS into our airspace. Together, we must meet these challenges while protecting the FAA's safety mission as the first and the #1 priority. We have the safest and yet the most complex airspace in the world, and we want to work with you, sir, to ensure that you continue to meet that mission. Now, before we get to your opening statement, I want to recognize our ranking member of this committee, the subcommittee, the gentleman from North Carolina, Mr. Price, for his opening statements. Mr. Price, good to have you here, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Administrator, it's good to have you again before this committee. Look forward to your testimony. As the chairman has said, the FAA budget proposed requests $15.9 billion in budgetary resources. That is a $400 million decrease from last year's enacted level. The request, I believe, would provide sufficient resources to staff the air traffic organization and provide the resources needed to modernize our airspace and improve safety. Now, when it comes to airport improvements, the request includes a proposal to allow large airports to fund these improvements through an increase in the passenger facility charge. Small and medium airports would still receive funding through the AIP program. So this is responsible for the decrease in overall funding. And of course, the probabilities of these fees happening will have to be considered as we do our work. As you know, I have concerns about the proposed FAA reauthorization proposal put forward by the Transportation and Infrastructure Committees, in particular, concerns about separating air traffic and air safety functions at the FAA, and I look forward to discussing these issues today. I'm sure others will as well. I'd also like to hear more about the NextGen program, how it's going, how it promises to improve the safety and efficiency of our nation's airspace. Indeed, in some instances, is already doing so. Your budget request includes $877 million for NextGen capital investments. That's an increase of $22 million over the fiscal 16 enacted level. While we build the air traffic control system of the future, we've got to maintain legacy systems in a state of good repair. Many facilities are decades old, but they're still critical to the operation and safety of the system. So we'll need to learn how the FAA is improving safety and efficiency through the research of new technologies, what our priorities for investment are. The current authorization for the FAA expires at the end of March. It's clear that short-term extensions don't provide the certainty needed to make long-term improvements in the system. So I'm hopeful that while we work out a long-term authorization bill that we can all support, we provide the FAA with an extension that gives the airports, airlines, our workforce, and the traveling public the certainty they need to move forward. Look forward to your testimony. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, sir. Administrator Huerta, your full written testimony will obviously be included in the record. And now, again, thanking you for being here. You have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, Chairman Diaz-Balart, Ranking Member Price, and members of the subcommittee. And thank you for the opportunity to discuss the fiscal year 2017 budget request for the Federal Aviation Administration. The FAA's 2017 budget request is for $15.9 billion to support the FAA's mission to run the safest and most efficient aerospace system in the world while continuing to transform our airspace through NextGen. These budget priorities are important to us, and they also play a larger role in the long-term health of our nation's economy. We continue to make strides deploying key elements of the NextGen air traffic system while also welcoming new users into our nation's airspace. NextGen is no longer some nebulous and futuristic aspiration. It is happening today. When I spoke to you last year, I told you we were almost finished with the installation of our en route automation modernization system, or ERAM. It is now complete and is delivering promised results as the backbone of our NextGen technology transformation. Similarly, the ground infrastructure for ADS-B is finished, and ADS-B traffic and weather broadcasts are now available across the country. As we complete this foundation, our accomplishments and to outline next steps. We've made significant progress in 4 NextGen priority areas, including performance-based navigation and datacom. We're replacing old flight paths with more efficient satellite-based procedures, and datacom technology is giving pilots and controllers a new and more efficient way to communicate critical safety information. For the operations budget, the FAA is requesting $10 billion in 2017 for day-to-day operations of our nation's aviation system. This represents a 1% increase above the FY 2016 enacted level and includes the cost of providing safe, secure, and cost-effective air traffic services to commercial and to private aviation. This budget will strengthen our safety and security programs, hiring 16 new safety-critical staff for the integration of unmanned aircraft systems, or UAS. We'll also hire 13 new personnel in our Office of Commercial Space Transportation to support regulatory, safety, and airspace integration efforts. And we've boosted funding to improve the security of our most critical NAS facilities and protect the FAA from malicious insider activity. For facilities and equipment, or F&E, the 2017 request of $2.8 billion maintains the capacity and safety of our nation's airspace while we continue to modernize and to transform it. The non-NextGen portion of our investment, representing almost $2 billion, will be to sustain current systems. This funding will be a down payment on our maintenance backlog, keeping systems operational and our employees safe. Further reducing the backlog will require continued commitment for several years. Our research, engineering, and development request of $167.5 million allows us to boost funding for the Continuous Low Energy Emission and Noise, or CLEAN program, to support the President's plan to reduce carbon dioxide emissions by 32% from 2005 levels by 2030. It also includes $8.4 million to meet the growing demand for unmanned aircraft systems. Our airports budget request, as you noted, is for $2.9 billion. This reflects our ongoing priority of focusing federal resources on projects of highest priority and greatest benefit to aviation at the smaller commercial and general aviation airports. And at the same time, the budget would allow commercial service airports to increase non-federal passenger facility charges from the current maximum of $4.50 to $8. The PFC level has not been increased in more than 15 years, and our analysis shows that due to inflation, this higher PFC level is needed just to provide an equivalent level of buying power. That means that large hub airports will benefit from more direct and more local control over their funding and over their improvements. Before we turn to questions, I'd like to take a moment to address the upcoming debate over FAA reauthorization. Last month, as you all know, the House Transportation and Infrastructure Committee unveiled a proposal for how air traffic control services could be provided in the future. We're open to having this discussion. I would be happy to answer your questions.
Again, thank you very much for your statement. We're going to, members, we're going to proceed as we have before. Standard 5-minute rounds, alternating sides, recognizing members in order of seniority as they were seated at the beginning of the hearing. So as I've asked you before, and by the way, you've been exceedingly cooperative, please be mindful of your time and allow the administrator time to answer within your 5 minutes. Administrator, I'm proud that due to the bipartisan budget agreement, we were able to fund FAA's NextGen programs at nearly $980 billion for FY16. Your budget request includes $1 billion for NextGen, and which is a $20 million increase, as we've said. The modernization of airspace is obviously a complex, difficult, complex task, and we're eager to see the FAA deliver on the promise of NextGen. And I think we've been eager for a long time, right? We want to see more efficient routes, more on-time flights, and frankly, better service to the flying public. Too often, however, we have seen programs that have been delayed and with cost overruns. So what steps is FAA taking to speed the delivery of NextGen programs, and what are the lessons that you have learned from past challenges, such as the cost overruns and the schedule delays and the, which we already talked about, the ERAM system, which went $300 million over budget?
Taking first the ERAM program, as you talked about, when I joined the agency over 5 years ago, we baselined the program, rebaselined the program, and created a program management organization that was really designed to impose project management discipline on these major technological programs. And since that time, we have met all of our schedule and all of our cost commitments for that program. And as I testified to, it is now complete. That is, you can think of it as building the iPad upon which we're now building the applications. For our current fiscal year budget request, it is focused in 4 areas that were designed and negotiated in conjunction with industry. They fall in 4 areas: data communications, surface operations, multiple runway operations, and performance-based navigation. And the principle and framework that we've worked with industry is that we want to match benefits with investments and deployment of projects. We've used this approach for the last several years and have found it to be quite beneficial in ensuring that industry is on board with how we are prioritizing investments and that they're actually seeing benefits. And they have identified, the types of things that they would like us spending these resources on. And so I think that we're making very, very good progress in yielding real benefits.
So are you pretty certain that what you have learned now you can use to improve other NextGen programs moving forward?
I do.
As well.
I do. When we established the PMO, the idea was that we wanted to create a replicable process that could be used on the full scope of technology deployments that the agency is undertaking. So we've employed this in our terminal modernization platform, which is proceeding apace with the support from this committee. And we've also introduced and are using these principles in our airspace redesign programs as well.
Could you also outline your progress and deployment plans for some of your major NextGen programs, such as ADS-B or, again, you mentioned performance-based navigation, but if you could outline some of that as well.
Yeah, in fiscal year 2017, our focus in the datacom area is to complete the deployment of tower service datacom services at 56 airports. And that is work that is already underway. We have 8 that are deployed so far. We will be at that 56 by the end of the calendar year in 2016. And then we convert to modifying and introducing this technology into our en route facilities, which is scheduled for 2019. For surface operations, the focus is on a program we call Terminal Flight Data Manager, and this is a program that enables us to better balance operations on the surface of the airport and would enable us to run a much more efficient operations because through information sharing through the wide scope of users at the airport. In the area of multiple runway operations, our focus is on a program called Wake Recat. This is where we are able to close separation standards between aircraft, and it gets us greater capacity on existing runway facilities. And, within 2017, our focus would be on 3 locations where there would be a great deal of focus on implementing this. This is a very, very promising program that is yielding significant benefits in places like Memphis or Atlanta. Performance-based navigation would be to focus on fully implementing Atlanta and Charlotte, as well as our programs in Cleveland, Detroit, and Southern California.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Price, you're recognized, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me just quickly follow up on your question and then turn to my own, because I too am eager to get some details on the record here about the NextGen program and the kind of milestones we can expect. I think you've answered that question. I wonder if you see any barriers to achieving these milestones, if there are things we should know about that might prevent us from fully achieving this transition to satellite-based navigation. And then I wonder particularly about the expectations for the commercial air carriers and the general aviation community, which are required to install the necessary avionics for the ADS-B signal by 2020. What can you tell us about the progress these groups have made?
Well, I think your 2 questions are related, because I think one of the significant challenges is to ensure that the users of the system are in fact equipped with ADS-B by 2020. The agency has been working for the last several months on an initiative we call Equip 2020, which is a collaborative activity that we have with the industry. And we're focused on the 2 big classes of users. For commercial aviation, the airlines, the air carriers are currently submitting their planned schedules to equip their aircraft and during their regular maintenance cycles, and to have that done by 2020 as required by the law. For general aviation, the focus it's a much larger universe of potential users, and estimates vary between 100,000 and 160,000 aircraft in the general aviation space. The principal barrier has been cost of equipping the aircraft. And actually significant progress has been made in the last year with price reductions that have now gotten it to the point where it is really within what the industry had said in 2008 represented an affordable price target. And so we're very focused on ensuring that people don't wait, that they take the time to equip now so as to ensure that we don't run into a bottleneck in the year before 2020.
Thank you. That's helpful. Let me turn now to I suppose the predictable topic of ATC privatization and the reauthorization measure. As you know, our Transportation and Infrastructure Chairman would like to privatize air traffic control. And I know that countries such as Canada and the United Kingdom have instituted aviation systems that separate air traffic operations from the safety regulatory system. When I met with your chief operating officer a few weeks ago, we discussed some of the coordination that goes on between the air traffic organization and aviation safety. So just to give us an angle of vision on this, would you discuss with us the value of having air traffic and aviation safety under one umbrella organization? Has it helped advance the safety of the system? How has it helped advance the safety of the system? And for that matter, the implementation of NextGen?
A principal area of focus for us has been on shifting from a very linear process to develop and deploy technology to a collaborative process. What I mean by that is a linear process has the engineers design something, then they throw it over the wall to the certification people who make a decision as to whether it's safe. And then it gets thrown over the wall to the operations people who need to figure out how to operationalize it and put it in the system. And that process can take you many, many years. What we adopted several years ago was a collaborative process where we bring everyone together on the front end. And and it opens up a dialogue over what are the issues that we're going to see in certifying the safety of a particular procedure or deployment. how does that relate to the technological work that's taking place? And then what are the operational considerations that need to be put into place? And what we have found is this collaborative process saves us a great deal of time. Things that would ordinarily take 5 to 10 years can be cut down to 3 to 5, if you're really aggressively deploying this. And so it is important that in any framework that we're able to maintain that high degree of collaboration.
Would that, sounds as though you believe that wouldn't necessarily be threatened under a privatization scheme, but it might pose some pretty serious challenges given the working arrangements you've developed. Is that fair?
I think it's fair to say that everyone needs to share a common vision and a common set of goals of what the mission is, what we're trying to establish, and when. And that's very important to do. Structure alone doesn't affect that, but it is an important consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Mr. Joyce.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Administrator Huerta, in March of 2015, the Inspector General found the FAA was not properly using data to identify safety risks, therefore impeding the effectiveness of FAA's hazardous materials voluntary disclosure reporting program. In response to this finding, the Inspector General made 9 recommendations to your agency, 8 of which you agreed with. And on the one that your reasoning for the partial disagreement with the Inspector General's recommendation to develop an automated system such as a website to allow air carriers to report potential violations under hazardous materials voluntary disclosure reporting program. Do you feel this budget request includes sufficient funding to implement the 8th recommendation to develop an automated system?
Actually, we're going at it in a somewhat different way. Our original non-concurrence was based on the technical feasibility and the cost associated with developing a standalone system. Since that time, we have determined a way forward where we can build it into the automated reporting processes that we're already using in the aviation safety area and not create a redundant system. And so we're now working out the details of that, and it is on track, and we are in consultations with the IG on a schedule for doing that.
So you've prioritized this?
Yes.
Okay. Can you point to some tangible improvements in this program since March of last year?
Well, I think I will need to get back to you with specifics with respect to this program. I will say as a general matter, voluntary reporting programs have proven to be very, very good in terms of generating data. And data is really at the heart of how you analyze and assess risk in the system and mitigate it.
How has your agency worked directly with DHS and particularly TSA to determine the level of funding needed and coordinated efforts so that every dollar that's being appropriated to TSA or FAA is used to its fullest potential?
We have a very close collaborative relationship with the Transportation Security Administration. I've met personally with Administrator Neffinger and before him his predecessor, Administrator Pistol. And we regularly share information in terms of what we're doing. The things that we are requesting in this budget with respect to security are very different from the things that are requested by TSA, where they're dealing with broad passenger safety in the system, and we're dealing with the security of the air traffic facilities that we...
In response to the fire set at the Chicago Air Route Traffic Control Center by an employee in 2014, the IG's office released a report this past September stating that the FAA's contingency plans and security protocols were insufficient at Chicago Air Traffic Control. Can you please provide specific steps your agency has taken to apply the 7 recommendations made to your office by the Inspector General and reported in their findings?
Sure. When the report was issued, that followed a 30-day review that I had undertaken immediately after the incident in 2014. And that identified a number of the same issues that were identified by the Inspector General, which we had already mitigated or were in the process of mitigating. They dealt with things such as access control and separation of critical infrastructure and a whole range of other issues associated with that. In this budget, we do have some additional funding requests to deal with long-term hardening and facility security, that will continue to carry those out.
Great. Thank you. Return the balance of my time, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Quigley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Administrator, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Sir, you have the statutory authority to, quote, relieve and protect the public health and welfare from aircraft noise through regulations to control and abate aircraft noise. I, of course, have O'Hare Airport, and we only had 50,000 complaints in November, 82,000 in December, where, you know, it's winter and windows are closed. O'Hare modernization, so far not so good on performance, but certainly good at cranking up the noise complaints. Any number of ways to look at this. Let's start with soundproofing. Compounding the problem that we don't have enough homes, schools, and businesses soundproof, we've got materials wearing out after 15 to 20 years of use. I believe we're still going forward with the 65 DNL analysis, which, if lowered, as it probably should be, will just expand fairly dramatically just how many areas need that soundproofing. And finally, if you have time, some sense of the FAA and the city's efforts to try to balance out the use of those runways, not just at night, to try to reduce this burden.
Taking first, let me take first the 65 DNL. That is a study, as you correctly noted, is underway right now. And the study has a 2-year timetable attached to it, the first of which is data collection, an appropriate metric to measure impact of aircraft noise on communities. And the second is, if it is 65 still the right level? And we have to have a full year's worth of a survey in order to have a valid analysis there, and we are underway in that. As it relates to the O'Hare Modernization Program and your reference to that program, the most recent amendment that we made to the letter of intent for OMP is to accelerate construction of another parallel runway, as you well know, which is something that does enable us to get at what you're trying to get at here, which is separation and spreading out of traffic. And that is one of the things that you know, we're very much interested in working with the airport authority and with the communities on. As it relates to soundproofing, that is certainly a conversation that we are happy to have with the airport in terms of how to allocate their federal funds toward, you know, this and other projects there in Chicago.
There's not even close to the kind of money at any local airport. Airports like Atlanta and Chicago have extraordinary national implications for the economy. To think that the city or even the local suburbs are going to be able to muster that, even with the help of the airlines, is just not there. I mean, and let's recognize what we already know. I mean, the Harvard School of Public Health study showed that the issues with noise, especially on senior citizens, has a profound cardiological impact. So why don't we recognize that we've got a real serious problem here, adding yet another parallel runway when all these, so far, the parallel runways have given us. Let's just look at this. We spent billions on O'Hare modernization. So let's start with 2004. O'Hare has 75% on-time departure and 76 on-time. O'Hare ranked 25th with a 76% on-time departure. Fast forward to this year, 76% of flights departing on time. We had 7,600 fewer operations in August 2004. So we spent billions on dramatic improvements in the airport with absolutely zero improvements in performance and noise complaints. And believe me, with all due respect, your own data shows that noise will increase dramatically when O'Hare modernization is completed. So to think that we can't either spread out this burden more or add a lot more resources for noise control buffering is just not going to get the job done.
Well, as I said, you know, one of the things that the program does enable us to accomplish is the thing that you were talking about, which is perhaps spreading out this over a larger segment of the surrounding area around the airport. As it relates to resources, what I was talking about was, you know, this is certainly an eligible use of AIP funds, and should there be an interest in allocating more to that, I mean, that is certainly a conversation that we would be willing to have.
Mr. Yoder.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Administrator, welcome to the committee. Thank you. Wanted to ask you about drones, and FAA estimated that 1 million drones may have been sold this past holiday season, so it's becoming an increasingly interesting topic. In particular, I'm interested in how the FAA plans on managing the airspace below 500 feet for drones that leave line of sight. What's the plan there? Are you working with NASA on their unmanned traffic management system? And what can our government do to make sure that we're not holding back progress and growth in this industry and the entrepreneurial spirit in this country while still providing safety? How do we find that balance?
Sure. We are working with NASA on UTC, but I will stress that, while that represents one technological solution, it's not the only technological solution that might be out there. I think that, as we're looking at how we integrate unmanned aircraft, in many respects, we have a more complicated challenge than a lot of other countries do, simply because the airspace that these aircraft fly in is the same airspace that is used by our very, very large general aviation segment. And so we have a number of things that are ongoing right now. The first is, you well know, is a rulemaking that we are expecting to finish in the spring, which deals with small unmanned aircraft below 55 pounds. In addition to that, we recently commissioned an aviation rulemaking committee to look at an even smaller category, the so-called micro unmanned aircraft systems, to see, and this follows on the rulemaking activity where we got a lot of comments on, was there a way that we could deal with a smaller category of aircraft. Beyond line of sight represents a significant challenge for us, and this is one of the questions you asked about. We have 2 research activities that are underway that we call them our Pathfinders. There are a total of 4, 2 of which focus on beyond line of sight. One is with the BNSF Railroad and research they're using to use unmanned aircraft flying at relatively low altitudes for safety inspections, security inspections, and so on, and testing this out. The other is with a company called Precision Hawk that is very focused on the specific characteristics of the aircraft. I think that a larger question for us as a government is that we're starting to think about is how to square the FAA's interest in maintaining a safe airspace with what a local government's concern might be to regulating quiet enjoyment of property owners within that jurisdiction. And this raises a number of questions that we haven't had to deal with before, but that we're starting to put some people together to think about and talk about, and we will be consulting, with the various interests on that.
I appreciate that answer. It's also my understanding that your budget submission does not list, changing topics here, a specific dollar figure for the essential contract tower program, which serves a lot of our districts. And if I'm incorrect, please correct me. Can you tell the committee what funding level the contract tower program is expected to need for FY 2017?
Sure.
And if it's not listed, why isn't it listed?
We've requested $157.3 million for the Federal Contract Tower Program for 2017. That's a bit of a plus up of the $154.4 million that was included in the FY 2016 bill. That includes the cost share program as well, and so this would enable us to, consider some modest expansion of the program in 17.
Okay, I appreciate your emphasis there. And then lastly, I wanted to ask about the ground-based navigation and surveillance systems. I know we've had a good conversation today about NextGen and our investments there, which is important because we've got to modernize. But obviously we have ground-based systems that in some cases are 20 and 30 years old and in desperate need of recapitalization. I guess I'm wondering, what's the FAA's plan to address the need to recapitalize these assets? Do you have the resources you need to replace these systems over the next 3 years? And it's my understanding that some of the equipment is severely outdated, and if we maintain the old parts, maybe throwing good money after bad. So could you speak to that a little bit?
Sure. In fact, many of these are 50 years old in these facilities. We do have a request included in the capital program in excess of $400 million, which represents a down payment on the backlog here. And what we are doing is prioritizing which are critical facilities that we need to upgrade versus those that we could decommission or which have been overtaken by new technology. The major focus of that, of what we're requesting in 17, about a quarter of it goes to aging power systems, which are really the backbone of all of these nav aids, followed by a capital program for our large en route centers. These are the facilities that are about 50 years old for the most part. And then following that, our third largest category is our terminal facilities, TRACONs, where many TRACONs and towers, many of which are also significant facilities. We see this as a 10-year program where we really have to be focused overall on continuing to make these investments to ensure that these facilities are in a state of good repair.
Thanks for your answers. Yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Mr. Ryan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for your time. Appreciate you coming up. A couple years ago, the FAA changed its hiring practices. Before, the agency had granted a preference in hiring to graduates of a collegiate training initiative approved program. Kent State University in my district has the only ATC CTI program in the state of Ohio. The program prepared students in the air traffic control field and was considered a prerequisite. Now, in 2013, the FAA dropped this preference and instead relied on a biographical questionnaire to review candidates for air traffic control positions. Many candidates were passing the FAA's aptitude and skills exam, but were failing the biographical assessment. So I've heard a lot of concerns in my congressional district and in Ohio about these changes. People and kids who have spent the time and money to attend the CTI initiative school, and I have a CTI school in my district, as I mentioned, that has played an invaluable role. I've been out, I've visited the school, and it's a great program. So I know that you've made some adjustments to the biographical questionnaire. Can you please elaborate on these adjustments, talk a little bit about how the changes have impacted hiring, and also if you can give us an update on how these new developmental controllers are faring in their training as well.
Sure. The biographical assessment is designed to focus on factors such as flexibility, risk tolerance, self-confidence, resilience, stress tolerance, those sorts of things. And so it is a set of skills that are as important as the basic skill tests that are included in the ATSAT itself. The principal factor that I think affects people's ability to get a job, however, is just the sheer competitiveness of the profession. On average, we hire something between 1,600 and 2,000 controllers. That's what our target would be for a year. The first time we opened this up as a public announcement, we got in excess of 25,000 applicants for those positions. And so, clearly this is something that, there's going to be a large number of people that aren't selected just given the ratio of applicants versus jobs. I will say that the CTI students have fared very well, though, in this process. In the first year, where we've looked at a full year's worth of data, essentially a CTI student, 2/3 of those that were selected in that initial cohort had some CTI background, either a 2-year or a 4-year program. And so we believe that actually the combination of the screening methods did in fact give credit for the skill set that somebody coming out of a CTI program might have. And that was reflected in the applicant pool.
Are we running the risk of kids not going into those programs now and not having that high level of qualification? Like you said, they're making their way in. Mm-hmm. But
I don't think so. I think that what we're seeing a lot of the programs are doing is adopting a broader base of potential job series that are there. And so I think that it's probably fair to say that you're far better off if you go into any kind of a collegiate program, keeping open a whole lot of options of possible careers in the aerospace industry that could come out of it and not necessarily limiting yourself to air traffic.
I appreciate that, and we'll follow up with you on that. 2 other quick questions. Well, I guess one's a comment. I saw that there was a $450 million decrease in the president's request with grant and aid for airports, AIP. So I know there are a lot of people on this committee and in Congress that are going to work really hard to try to fill that gap. I don't have time to get into that. If we get another round, maybe I'll let you elaborate on that. One of the issues that I'm concerned about that we're seeing a little bit on in news reports and on TV, the laser incidents for commercial aircraft. And more and more of these aircrafts are being attacked with lasers aimed at the cockpit and getting turned around in some instances. We know a flight last month had to return to Heathrow because of the laser beam. So I would like to know what steps the FAA is taking to address this issue and protect the pilots, the crew, and the aircraft from this ongoing issue. And coincidentally enough, we have a company in my district that is working with the military now for kind of the visors for the military to wear that I think would have a decent application here. So can you just tell us what you're looking into now as far as addressing this issue? What technologies or research you're taking on?
Certainly on the technology piece that you mentioned, I'd like to learn more about it, but what we're doing generally is it is a crime to shine a laser at an aircraft. It's an incredibly dangerous thing to do. And so we depend very much on a partnership with law enforcement at all levels, federal, state, and local levels. And that is something, you know, I've seen the same data that you have seen. There are certain areas and hotspots where it has picked up, and what that requires us to do, and what we are doing, is working with our law enforcement partners. We have had a fair amount of success, as based on the reporting from pilots, of being able to pinpoint where it's coming from, increasing enforcement in those areas, and being able to apprehend individuals in many instances.
So are these?
Let me,
Sorry, Mr. Chairman. I just is this? Who are these people doing this? Are these just kids screwing around, or is this?
It's
a national security issue for us.
It is. It's all of the above. It is kids screwing around. It is people that want to cause trouble. It is some people that think it's cool and fun and don't understand the danger of it. But any way you look at it, it is an incredibly dangerous thing.
thank you. No problem. Mr. Jolly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Administrator, thank you for being here. I want to talk a little bit about the decision-making process for PFC applications. And I know the significant contribution language is statutory, but do you have rules or guidance as to how you interpret significant contribution?
We do. We'd be happy to share the specific guidance with you, but in a general sense, what we do is we evaluate what the airport is proposing to do, make the investment in, and the purpose and need that it fulfills.
But is the term significant contribution defined? Is it backed up by written guidance of any kind?
You know,
And I'll tell you why. I mean, it's
Yeah.
I don't intend this to be a gotcha question, but you know, you have a lot of airports frustrated by they collect the $450, they only get $3 approved when they go before your department. And in a meeting of the last year, we understand that in a sit down with the team, with your team, to discuss why it didn't satisfy significant contribution, your department's answer to this one particular group was, well, we know it when we see it. And it seemed to be a very elusive standard and, frankly, a somewhat frustrating explanation. If the definition of significant contribution is not well defined, it's simply know it when you see it.
sure. If you could share with me what are the details of that situation, I'd be happy to look into it.
But the question, there is no further explanation of significant contribution that your department adheres to? Any written guidance, what satisfies significant contribution?
I don't know how it is framed and discussed, but I'm happy to look into that for you.
Okay. I'd appreciate that, and I'd appreciate following up with you on that, because if there are not standards or consistent standards by which these decisions are made, perhaps we need to address it up here, if we could. Second question, different subject. You all commissioned a study about separating safety regulators from air traffic control service providers a few years back, I believe, about 2 years. Do you recall this study?
Not during my tenure at the FAA.
Okay, then I'll submit it for the record.
Sure.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And I may have skipped over Mr. Young, so I apologize to the gentleman. So, Mr. Young, you're recognized.
Thank you for the opportunity, Mr. Chairman. Ranking Member Price, Administrator Huerta, welcome. I have a question about the FAA proposal to get rid of the contract weather program, observer program at 57 airports. Last fall, contract weather observers at the Des Moines airport spotted the formation of a tornado. It wasn't spotted in the tower by air traffic control or other airport authorities, but the contract weather observers. And they were able to mobilize citizens in Des Moines, and this is very valuable, of course, what their work is. A concern I have right now is about the responsibility now that the FAA wants to shift over to the air traffic controllers right now for this responsibility, and that could be a real strain, I think, on them, aside from just making sure that the planes get in safely. Because they can't leave their towers to do this and go down on the ground because of regulations. It keeps them from comprehensively monitoring the weather, in my opinion, if they also can't leave the towers at some time. So earlier this year, you had a safety risk management panel. There was one at the Des Moines airport. Our staff was involved in that, and my office participated, and thank you for that. But it seemed like with this panel, it wasn't really about getting the feedback from the airport authority, the Air Force even, and the contract weather observers and others, but it was more or less you were telling folks how it's going to be and what you're going to do, and not really get some feedback. And so it doesn't seem like the FAA is providing any kind of assurances to airport officials, the Air Force, and Congress that this new system is safer. Yet you are bound and determined to go forward regardless. So can you talk a little bit about how the FAA is proceeding with this, and I just would appreciate your comments on this and may have a follow-up question.
Sure. The issue is not whether the function is provided. The issue is, as you pointed out, who does it. And we already use limited aviation weather reporting station controllers to provide this service at close to 400 sites in the NAS right now. And that includes 143 FAA towers and 250 contract towers. The 57 that we identified were facilities that currently use contract weather observers but have an operational profile that matches with that 391 that are already doing this. And the process that we put in place is to commission an individual safety risk assessment for each of those facilities, and that's what's ongoing right now. The meeting that you reference is part of that process, where we walk through and we do, this is what our plan would be here at, in your case, this airport, Des Moines Airport. And we hear things back, and then that is combined with an overall assessment of the complexity of the airport, and are there factors that we need to consider before we make a final determination. We haven't made that determination at this point. That analysis is ongoing.
Thank you for that, and we'll have some concerns further that we'll pass along to you, so thank you. Second question, and my last question, the Association for Unmanned Vehicle Systems International predicts 80% of commercial market is going to be by drones. Eventually, it'll be used for agricultural purposes. Sure. Now, it's no surprise that I have concerns with this because Iowa is a very agricultural state. A lot of other members have some interest in this as well. And so, you know, Iowa farmers are using drones right now for precision agriculture, monitoring their lands, monitoring their herds and flocks. And so just want to make sure that stakeholder comments from the agriculture community are included. And so the question is, how are you soliciting comments from them? And then in the end, when guidelines are put out, and I would be interesting to find a timeline for the 55-pound or less guidelines and when that'll be done, how will you be transmitting the guidelines and educating the agriculture community what these guidelines will be?
Sure. The taking first the rule, the small UAS rule, it is a rulemaking, and we expect to complete it in the spring. It did go out for initial notice around this time last year, and so we're wrapping up the adjudication of comments on that. As it relates to agriculture, I mean, they're part of our broad outreach efforts as we do consult with users and stakeholders, and we do have a number of exemptions that we have granted to users so that they can operate for commercial purposes, unmanned aircraft in agricultural use, for agricultural surveying, for spraying applications, and other activities. And if there is interest, if there is continued interest from other players, we do, you know, have a very active exemption process that we can go through. When the rule is in place, the need for a lot of that goes away, because what that will lay out then is for commercial purposes, what are the specific guidelines for operation.
And then finally, just really quickly, want to make sure that our proprietary information by farmers is protected should the government, FAA, or any other entity be flying over private property and that kind of thing. Just make sure that their proprietary information is not used by the government.
Yeah, no, well, I think
It's a very
that,
sensitive issue with the agriculture community.
sure, I personally have not heard of that specific issue, but I will say that we have very robust data protection programs in place for the full scope of our regulatory activities, you know, where people report information and we are able to maintain the confidentiality of it.
I'd like to learn more about those protections. I yield back time that I don't have, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Young. Administrator, in 1995, you were given, FAA was given significant flexibilities and relief, and also relief from federal procurement laws and regulations. Now, why have we seen challenges in next-gen technology procurement and development in spite of these flexibilities? That's one question. And are there any additional authorities that you could use in order to more effectively develop and deploy next-gen technologies?
Sure. When we received the procurement changes that were done, we created the acquisition management system, and actually that has been a good news story for us. You know, that has enabled us to reduce time to award, and in fact, we consistently rank better than our peer agencies across the government, both in time to award and cost of award. You know, our cost to award relative to, you know, the cost embodied in a contract is something that compares very, very favorably. As it relates to, you know, project overruns, I mentioned earlier the program management discipline that we've introduced in the last few years. And if you look back over a 20-year period, in the first 10 years after we had acquisition reform and changes, there was I think it's probably fair to say that we weren't where we needed to be in terms of being able to manage overruns. But as a result of the program management and acquisition discipline that we put in place, these last 10 years, we've seen a significant improvement. We are, you know, have, I think, very low percentage overruns in projects, and we are able to bring them in on time.
Mr. Price talked about that. You know, we know that a fully transformed system is going to be past 2025.
Yeah.
But can you speak broadly as to what realistically can be achieved by 2025, by that deadline, as far as NextGen?
Sure. In 2020, backing up a little bit, 2025 was the original target date that was set through an interagency effort, the Joint Planning and Development Office, when we first established the program overall. I think that and since that time, as a result of additional research, things like new users, there have been adjustments to it, but we believe that given all of that, most of the original objectives that we had set when we first established that program will be met by 2025. What do those things include? Well, it includes programs such as NextGen Weather. It includes a program that we call SWIM, which is a system-wide information management, which is a way of information sharing across the full scope of the users of the system. We will have full en route datacom, which is a huge time and safety benefit associated with how we transmit flight instructions to pilots and how they respond to it. We'll have ADS-B out, fully deployed, but we will also have ADS-B in procedures, which gives pilots much greater situational awareness, blending data from a broad variety of different sources. And we will have much greater use and emphasis on more fuel-efficient procedures, which is where the airlines really see the significant benefit and where you also see significant benefits associated with emissions. Integrated surface operations, I talked a little bit about how we're starting that in fiscal year 2017. Having fully integrated surface operations actually enables us to ensure that what you don't have is extensive taxi-out times with attendant burning of fuel, emissions and noise and everything that goes with that. You can get off the surface of the airport much more quickly. That's what we were envisioning when we first established the 2025 framework, and I think it's fair to say that we're well on track to delivering that by 2025.
Thank you. Mr. Price.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Administrator, I want to return just for a moment to the authorization situation that we face. As you know, the authorization for the FAA's programs expires at the end of March. The Transportation Infrastructure Chairman's controversial reauthorization proposal has been shelved. Discussions are already underway to determine the length of any short-term extension. I don't imagine anyone, yourself included, wants to see a repeat of the 23 short-term extensions that the authorizers had to resort to a few years ago. It'd be helpful, I think, if you just describe to us how these 2- and 3-month extensions affect the operation of your agency and key stakeholders. For example, as we approach airport construction season this spring and summer, what, in practical terms, might a short-term extension mean for planned airport projects?
Well, if we're in a period of a short-term extension, contracts by necessity have to be shortened to fit within the authorized amounts that that an individual or an airport or a contractor is able to spend. That leads to, and we saw this when we were going through the short-term extensions, stopping and starting of contracts and all the attendant costs that go with that, of needing to demobilize a contractor, then to start it all up again. On the agency side, our ability to enter into longer-term contract is also has the potential to be impacted as well, and there are 2 effects associated with that. One is, if you have to break a contract into smaller pieces, by definition, it is going to be more costly than if you are able to, as a result of having some degree of certainty, go into a much longer contractual time period with a greater degree of certainty. And so the disruption of the stopping and starting not only slows things down, but it does impose very, very real and significant costs.
Thank you. That's helpful, very concisely expressed. Let me turn to the controller workforce, the staffing and training of that workforce. Your budget assumes that the agency will have roughly 14,270 air traffic controllers. That's about 1,000 fewer controllers than you had 5 years ago. I wonder first what accounts for this drop. Are you concerned about the drop? What are the expected retirement patterns over the next few years that might exacerbate that decline? And then just to anticipate the next question, that has to do with training. With regard to training, you recently switched contractors. What, if anything, has changed with your training program under the new contractor? What steps are being taken to ensure that there's an adequate number of sufficiently trained controllers for each facility? Might this assurance require you to do cross-training, additional cross-training on different procedures and sectors in order to ease potential staffing problems? And finally, how are you working to prevent controller washout, I think the term is, to ensure that new controllers are successfully integrated into the FAA workforce?
First of all, on the staffing, we are still catching up from the effects of 2013 when we went through the sequester and the shutdown, and we closed the FAA Academy, which effectively meant that we lost a year of hiring. And so now we're in the process of trying to make that up. Our current hiring plan calls for us to hire this year about 1,600, a little in excess of 1,600 controllers. We're actually very confident we're going to meet the target this year in that we already have over 2,000 or 2,800 applicants in clearance, and of those, 877 are already placed at the Academy or placed in facilities. And so I think we're going to beat that particular hiring target that we have for this year, and that'll be really critical. Jumping over the training for a moment and looking at the washout rate, one of the things that we're really trying to focus on through things, as we were talking about before, with the biographical assessment and with the ATSAT and the training, is to ensure that if someone is not cut out to be a controller, that we're actually not putting them in a facility and figuring it out then, that we're actually able to rule that out and make that determination much earlier in the process, which has the effect of actually we spend a lot less on training if we're catching it at that point. On the training contractor, the principal problem we had with the previous contractor is the way that the responsibilities were allocated. The FAA set the requirements, but it was up to the contractor to determine the resources. Under the new contract, the FAA maintains control over the resources, and so we think that that gives us much better line of sight in ensuring that we're able to meet budget targets and not encounter any overruns in the contract. The transition took place very seamlessly last fall, and I think we're in a good place.
Thank you. Mr. Jolly, you're recognized, sir. No, no further questions. And Mr. Quigley?
Thank you again, Mr. Chairman. One of the issues with OMP, O'Hare modernization, was the public outreach program. We were able to secure language in the omnibus mandating the FAA to update its community involvement manual and its implementation plan. Can you tell us how that's going, the timeline for that, and what kinds of programs you perceive coming from that change?
Sure. Last fall, we did begin the process of updating the Community Involvement Manual, which is effectively the guidelines for how you engage with and factor this into the whole development of airspace projects. We're currently, as a result of that now, working on developing a community involvement plan for airspace projects and performance-based navigation. The idea here is we want to consult earlier in the process with communities and also do it in a way where we're providing information that is easier to understand through things like Google Earth images, overlaying flight paths, and so on down the line. And the plan also addresses more effective communication on the purposes and the potential impacts of PBN projects. In terms of outreach and how we interact with the communities, one of the things that I think it is important is more interaction up and down the organization. In the past, I think that we have tended to focus much more on the airport authorities, and the airport authorities are in very different places. What we're really focused on is how do we improve and document communication with individuals and groups that might be outside of what is a defined process by the airport. I'm very committed to bringing community input and outreach earlier into the process, and I think we'll have better decision-making as a result of that.
I agree. There were instances in which in OMP, for example, the hearings were held in areas that were not the ones most impacted by the change. And in many areas, most impacted by change, there were no hearings whatsoever. The number of hearings involved, I think, should be taken into consideration as well, and making sure they're with community organizations and not with the close relative of the existing aviation department. I think that would help as well. And I think finally, I was just on cue about noise. It was disturbing, wasn't it? Finally, I think you need to be honest with people. I think everybody understands airports are noisy places. Everybody understands how important they are to the economic engine of a region. But I'll tell you, nobody said at any of these meetings, you're going to get 150 more flights over your head because of this. You're going to get fewer, you're going to get more. That bluntness never took place. And I think people feel that they were misled or that information was withheld. So I know it's hard to put those kinds of concepts into rules and regulations, but I think if you just imagine that you were living in those areas, you'd want to be told the truth, you want to focus on the people actually impacted, and you want to hear it more than once. But I appreciate your effort. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
And that was a pretty interesting exclamation point. If you arranged that, I'm pretty impressed.
Wait till tomorrow.
Mr. Jenkins.
Thank you.
Paralyzed veterans, and they continue to raise issues relating to the problems in the Carrier Access Act for people with disabilities being able to get on airplanes. So really just want to put it out there that I would look forward to working with the FAA and others to make sure that persons with disabilities have the best possible access. Secondly, was very concerned. Now, I know this isn't necessarily right under your area of the budget. It may be more oriented towards the Secretary's office, but under the Essential Air Service, the FY 2017 budget requests for EAS looks to
budget. The program, as you pointed out, is administered over in the Department of Transportation, but we will work with our colleagues and
Would
get
you mind finding out?
you an
and
answer to
I'd
that.
like to work with the chairman again. This is Essential Air Service is truly that, essential air service for my state and my district, and very concerned about the what appears to be a proposed budget cut. If you look at actually FY15, it was $261 million. Through the Omni, the enacted, it was 283. So we were actually putting more money in, and thank you, Mr. Chairman, putting more money in the current year. But instead of at least maintaining in the budget, as you referenced, we see a pretty dramatic cut. And I would like an explanation and try to restore that. The second issue is I'm a freshman member in the largest airport in my district is in Wayne County. It's the Huntington Tri-State Regional Airport. It is one of the airports where we've had some increases in ridership. They've got serious issues of parking. They need repair on the apron. Can you point me towards where we may be able to look to get funding to address the critical infrastructure needs that a growing airport has?
Sure. You know, we would want them to sit down, if they haven't already, with the airport's district office and kind of go over what is their overall master plan, what are their employments and their traffic, and what would they like to see there. Now, there's the combination of the AIP program itself, which is they will have a portion of the program that they will receive by formula, and which they will have the ability to allocate to these projects. I think what you're asking about, though, is the discretionary program.
Yes.
How they would compete for the discretionary program, and it really depends on what they're asking for and the schedule that they're asking for it on, but we're happy to talk with them about that.
Well, I would like to participate in those discussions and be a strong advocate because, again, we sense that a lot of the larger communities, the larger airports may have a little broader profile and get the lion's share. We want to make sure we're at least trying to get our fair share. My last question is, while it's not cited specifically in my district, there's a lot of people from my district that use it, and that's the Yeager Airport in Charleston, West Virginia. Over this last year or two, they've had a terrible issue relating to land movement. This is relating to the runway safety area that's collapsed completely. The engineered materials arresting system that is at the end of the airport. These are all, this was an investment by the FAA originally a number of years ago. The FAA funded, I think it was 90-10 on the and construction and the engineering. Well, now we've had this collapse. And while it was only $16 million to construct, estimates to repair it are in the 40 to 50 million. What is the FAA doing about the situation at Yeager Airport, and how much skin in the game financially will the FAA have to right this situation?
I'm not familiar with the details of that situation. I'll check into it and we'll get a response to you.
Okay. Well, I look forward to working with you. It's a stunningly tragic situation that's impactful in a large number of ways, and so I need to get this on your radar screen, and we need to resolve it.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Cuellar, by the way, very impressive group of folks from Laredo that you've had when, I guess, today in Washington.
Yes, sir. Thank you
You're
again,
recognized,
Mr.
sir.
Chairman, and thank you for being there. And apologize for being late. As you know, we got appropriations at the same time, so we're with the TSA Administrator, so Administrator Huerta, I'm sorry for being late. Let me ask you just a couple of quick questions. One of the patterns I'm seeing in some of the agencies is that they're having a hard time hiring people. And again, I don't know if you covered that here, but I know that in Homeland and other agencies, they've been having trouble. Usually it takes over a year, and I don't know if you've ever gone into job.gov, I think, and gone through that. It's a rather complicated process. It takes a long time. Do you have any way of getting some of your folks hired that's a little bit more expedited? And I do understand, you know, you need the STEM training. There's a different type of training that goes into the folks that you hire. But do you have anything, and I'm sorry if I missed something when I wasn't here, but is there something that you're doing to expedite your hiring?
Sure. We did talk a little bit about that, but just on a high level, what we did talk about is we're in a catch-up mode, particularly for the air traffic controller series. We have a target this year of hiring some 1,600 plus people, which we're going to beat. We're well on track to doing that, and we did that by opening up two series, two ways to get in there: an experience track and an inexperienced track. And right now we have about 2,400 plus people that are in vetting for these 1,600 positions, and we have close to 900 of them that were already placed at the FAA Academy or in facilities. And so I think we're well on track to doing that, but we're continuing to try to find ways to shrink that time period that it takes to get people in the system.
Sir, what is the time that it normally takes, and what are you trying to shrink that to?
Well, it's well under a year, you know, in our case. What we have is we've gone to a process for controllers where we open up a job announcement annually where anyone can apply. And so what we want to have is, you know, a fresh list that we're going through every year. If someone is an experienced or a former military controller, it's even faster than that, because they already have the experience, and as long as they pass the base qualification, they may be in a position where they also don't have to go to the FAA Academy for training, where they're able to go directly to a facility. For someone off the street, though, you know, once they come into the system, it can take a good 2 years to get them fully certified as a controller. You know, now that doesn't mean that they're waiting. That means they're in training. That means they're assigned to a facility, and they're getting checked out and certified on different levels of complexity of procedures. But to get them fully certified, you know, in our most complex facilities will take several years.
Following up on what Mr. Jenkins said about local facilities that sometimes need, and I understand there's been sequestration, there's been delays, there's been CRs, I understand all that, but same thing, I have a tower in Laredo that we've been trying to work on, and we've been working with Mr. Von Turner from your office and other folks. My question is, are you authorized to do public-private partnerships? So let's say we have a local entity that wants to help on a construction of a tower, and are you authorized? Because I know some agents, we had to do that for Homeland to allow them to do some of that work, but are you authorized to do public-private partnerships, accept contributions from, let's say, a local government?
Yes. Yeah. We have done that in a number of instances there where a local entity, it may be that a tower or another facility, you know, because it's relatively new relative to peer facilities, and so it may not rank as high, you know, in terms of a replacement cycle, but the airport or the local government may have a compelling interest to move that forward, you know, at a more accelerated rate. And yes, we do have the ability to cost share with them.
Okay. I got just a few seconds left. You know what Chairman Schuster is proposing, and I'm sure you covered this before I got here. You know, we've been very supportive of what Mr. Schuster has been doing on issues, but on the privatization issue, and I've supported privatization issues in the past, but when they take the appropriations away from us, we have a problem with that. So the reason I say this is Mr. Schuster's doing this, Chairman Schuster's doing this because he feels that y'all are not being responsive enough. And what do you tell us as members of the appropriators? And I assume everybody, I think both of y'all wrote the letter saying we want to, we want to control the oversight, the appropriations, the purse strings. How do you respond to that? Because I've heard it from both sides, and I'm sticking with my appropriators here because I think we need to control the purse string. But how do you respond to the other argument?
Well, the principal argument that we've heard the proponents talking about has been delays to the modernization of the system and so forth. And what we have been very, very focused on is how we deliver benefits under NextGen. I'd be happy to share with you, I know that we're running out of time here. There are a number of we've made great progress in deploying the core infrastructure and in deploying beneficial and accelerated and advanced navigation procedures that are yielding real benefits in terms of fuel savings, cost savings, and so forth for the users of the system. And it's a longer conversation. I know we're out of time, but I'd be happy to share that with you.
Thank you, Mr. Administrator.
Finally, Administrator, I want, there's one other issue, quicker and faster, is the Organization Designation Authorization, ODA, where FAA delegates authority to industry so that, again, the product certifications can happen more quickly. Can you describe the progress the FAA has made in advancing the use of ODA? And also how FAA has put into place more risk-based approach, a more risk-based approach to safety oversight?
Sure. This is an important program. It's something that actually is very important to me. We did commission in the last year a set of coordinated changes that we call Air Transformation. AIR is the acronym for our aviation certification branch. The key elements of the transformation are refreshing the certification strategy, which is really what the designees are looking for. What they want to understand is if they make investments in processes and so forth, they want to be very clear on what does that mean we are not going to do. Because where they have a hard time is if they make a significant investment in business processes, oversight processes, and then we come in with what they feel is a redundant layer of oversight there. A big part of that is the second factor, which is the management systems, where we're actually able to track what they do and match it with what we are doing so that we have line of sight on how the system is actually performing in real time, and that it's not, simply left to individuals, exercising discretion without fully understanding the full scope of what the company is actually trying to do there. And then the third is to flatten out our organization and work on the skill sets of the people that are there. And I'll give you one example on that. In general, our certification specialists tend to come out of the industries that they're overseeing. And that sets up, a situation where I like to think of it as everyone wants to build the airplane. And so the debate that you're having is how best to build the airplane. When you're overseeing a designee, it is a different skill. When you're overseeing a designee, the question you're asking is, does the designee have a reasonable basis to make the decision that they have made? Now, that may not be the decision you would make, but you're only evaluating, is it reasonable for them to, to have reached the conclusion that they reached? And there's a training component to that. There's also a skills component to that, because that's really, as you correctly pointed out, how you analyze data. What does the data tell you where there is risk in the system, and then how do you apply that? And so this is something, those are the three elements of what the program involves. What underpins it is a whole change management and, effort underway, because this is fundamentally changing how we do our job here. And then also ensuring that we have the tools in place to ensure that on the industry side, they're very focused on achieving what they need to do in a compliance culture.
And you mentioned organizational changes. Is it, where are you as far as, are you satisfied? Are those changes being made? Are you satisfied with those changes?
They're being made. It's a work in progress at this point. What we're trying to do is, conceptually, what we have on the CERT side is kind of a geographic organization. And so the Small Airplane Directorate is in the middle of the country near Kansas because that's where the small airplanes have historically been made. The Transport Airplane Directorate is in the Pacific Northwest. Will have national responsibility, and we believe that will be a lot more efficient.
Thank you. Mr. Price.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Ed, I wonder if you could address the research budget that you've presented to us. You are asking for $167.5 million. That's only 1% of FAA's total budgetary resources, but I assume it's a component of some importance. I wonder if you could briefly summarize that importance. What areas in particular hold the most promise for improving safety? Where are the most significant innovations occurring? Are there particular areas within the research area that might be accelerated if we were able to produce additional resources? And I suppose what I'm looking for here a little more broadly is a sense of the distinctive importance of this research budget and the way that it complements research budgets in other areas, draws on this. Why must you have your own research program? What does it bring to your operations that's of unique importance?
Well, I think the way to think of our research program is it's applied research. We have a very strong partnership with NASA. NASA is responsible, and others as well, for doing the far out, what's the promise that technology has? You probably read today of an effort underway with NASA to really look at the next generation supersonic transport and, what that would look like. Our focus is on, okay, how do you take that research and translate it into something that can actually be applied and used and integrated into our system? And so our current areas of focus are range from how are we incorporating new and composite materials? How do we certify them? What are their performance characteristics and so forth in the manufacture of aircraft? Power systems. There's been a lot of discussion about lithium batteries, what they represent in terms of their potential, but what do they represent in terms of a hazard? Fuel cell power sources as ways of getting us greater efficiency and lesser reliance on fossil fuels. New technologies for propulsion and new technologies for airframe design to address some of the issues that Mr. Quigley was talking about in terms of noise, and how do we get a much more efficient and how do we get a much better product that is a little more community friendly. We are also, cyber is a big issue. This is a technological based organization, and like all aspects of technology, we have evolved to a place where we have far fewer proprietary systems. We have now systems that we buy as services from the private sector that are based on the public internet, IP protocols, and that brings with it all of the challenges that the banking sector, the manufacturing, and the retail sector have in dealing and getting ahead of the cyber threat. And so we do a lot of research on how that threat is evolving and what are mitigation strategies for that. I will say that we try to focus our research, and we do this with an advisory committee, a research and development advisory committee that's made up of academics and industry participants, to prioritize what are things that are ready to go into the application timetable. And I think that we've had some great experiences there. For example, a number of years ago, the big focus of the research program was in cabin safety. And what we have seen in the last 5 years have been that accidents have become more survivable. And that's due to a lot of great work that has been done on flammability standards, structural systems, and so forth, that have had the effect of taking, what's an incredibly safe industry and making it even safer. But it's in this area of how do you take pure research and apply it in ways that will improve the system that our focus is.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank the members of the committees, and seeing no further question, Administrator, thank you again for being here. I think this has been very, very constructive. The committee staff will be in contact with your budget office regarding questions for the records, and I know that I have some, and I'm sure that we'll get others from members as well. So I would ask you if you would please work with the OMB to return the information for the record to the subcommittee within 30 days from Friday. And that obviously will allow us to publish the transcripts of today's hearings and make informed decisions when we're crafting this next bill. I look forward, all of us look forward to continue to working with you very closely as we are in this process of drafting the bill. Mr. Price, any final comments?
No, thank you. Good hearing.
Great. Well, with that, thank all the members. Thank you, sir, once again for what you do and for spending this time with us. And with that, the hearing is adjourned. Thank you.
Yes, sir, they are. It is